What's going on, Marines? The next video is going to be on sexual assault prevention and response. Just a reminder, watching this video is not the only qualification to complete your annual training requirement for Sapr. Make sure you're reading any of the orders and looking at any of the PowerPoints and slides that your units provide you to complete your annual training requirement. So Sapr is a lot better taught in a seminar and discussion forum. That way we can kind of talk about it and ask some questions. Obviously that's not possible right now due to the regulations of the travel ban. So I'm going to go through in three distinct sections here. We're going to talk first through the definitions, some common phrases and terms that you're going to need to know, and then we're going to talk about prevention and then response. It is in my opinion that through training and just the teachings that I've been a part of in the Marine Corps and the Navy team for the last few years, that we really harp on the response part of Sapr when we teach these courses, but there's definitely a lot in the prevention that we can go, and obviously we can stop it from happening before it happens, then that'd be a hell of a lot better than responding to it after it happens. Now, I know most of you are probably thinking, man, here we go again, here's another boring Sapr class, and I got it. This isn't something that I enjoy talking about simply because it's happening, right? Like if I didn't have to teach this class, then it probably means that we, as a Marine Corps, are doing a lot better with regard to sexual assault and sexual harassment, and a lot better means that it's not happening at all anymore. So that's the point we need to get to. That's going to be on us as leaders to make sure we stomp that out before it happens. So here we go with Sapr. The definitions I want to first go through. The first one is going to be sexual harassment. It's important to know the difference between sexual harassment and sexual assault as we go through the class, right? So sexual harassment is a form of sex discrimination that involves unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal and physical conduct of a sexual nature. So just think to yourself, hey, what are forms of sexual harassment that I know of? A lot of times we use phrases, we use whistling, we use pictures, things like that in our mind for sexual harassment, and those are all definitely forms of sexual harassment. There can be a bunch of different ways, right? Don't forget that sexual harassment can be something that's deemed as inappropriate by somebody else, but you might think it's appropriate. So I'm just going to use this as an example, not saying to sway you either way, but let's say you are playing basketball and somebody made a good shot. You're going down the court, give them a slap on the butt. Hey, nice shot. Somebody that's watching might say, hey, that's sexual harassment and potentially sexual assault, right? Because we have that physical contact there. Even though to you, it might be completely regular. So be aware of some things that are out there. Be aware of your surroundings and know that, hey, if there's any chance that this can be construed as harassment in any way, then it's probably something I shouldn't be doing. All right, for sexual assault, it's going to be unwanted sexual contact that is aggravated, abusive, or wrongful, to include unwanted and inappropriate sexual contact. So the big one we think of as sexual assault is rape, right? So that's the most prominent, and it's probably going to be the most emotional and physically demanding of the victim. But sexual assault can be as low as that butt slap that we talked about earlier, right? Of course, that key is going to be unwanted and inappropriate. So slaps, rubbing, if you are caressing someone in the chest region, in the butt, in any kind of sexual region, then it's going to be a form of sexual assault. So that physical contact is really what's stepping it over the line from harassment to assault. And then the other definition I want to make sure is clear is consent, right? We're going to talk about consent a little bit. So consent is words or overt acts indicating a freely given agreement to the sexual conduct at issue by a competent person. All right, so one of the big things we talk about with consent is that competent person part at the end. And what do you need to be competent, right? We need to be sober. That's the biggest one that we always get into the rabbit hole of, well, if they're drunk and I'm drunk, what can we do? Bottom line, they've got to be competent. So if there's any doubt that they're not competent, if they're not sober, if they're not in a state where they can confidently say yes or no to that action, then they're not going to consider that to be consent. So be aware of that. I'm not telling you that you need to have written out like contracts that say, hey, on this day, Lance Corporal Johnson consents to having sex with Lance Corporal Smith, right? That's not what I'm saying. You don't have to do that. Just make sure that you're reasonably getting consent, that both parties or all parties involved are in a right state of mind, and that they're competent, as stated in that definition, to be able to say yes to that action. Okay, so those are some of the definitions. We're going to go through some other phrases and terms here throughout, but I just want to clarify those before we get into the prevention and response part of the class. So prevention. All right, I told you earlier, in my opinion, prevention is what we really need to harp on, because if we can stop it before it happening, then that's great, right? The least amount of actions, sexual harassment, sexual assaults that go on, the better. And eventually, hopefully, as a Marine Corps and as a society, we can get down to that 0 number. But it's going to take a long time. We've got a lot of mentalities to break and a lot of commands that have to provide that climate to make sure that those are unacceptable and that the Marines know that it's unacceptable. So some things with regard to prevention here. How do we start preventing it? Teaching and understanding, right? So stuff like this is how we start preventing it. And I know you guys have sat through these classes how many times, but we're still not getting it. Someone's still not getting it out there because these things are still happening. So making sure that you, your Marines, and your units understand what is sexual harassment, what is sexual assault, and what consent means. Understanding those terms and phrases are going to go a long way, right? I don't know the numbers, but probably a ton of sexual assaults and harassments occur because the consent isn't actually there when it was thought that it was, right? So whether that was someone who was inebriated, if they just weren't in the right state of mind, whatever it might be, if there was just a misunderstanding in phrases or body language, stuff like that, I would be willing to guess that a lot of sexual assaults and harassments come from that lack of consent. So understanding and teaching the Marines what those things are, what those definitions are, is going to go a long way. That command climate, we already talked about that a little bit, but at every level, we talked about this in previous classes, at every level you can have an impact on your command climate. So even at the lowest levels, if your PFCs and Lance Corporal are sitting there enforcing the rules and enforcing the standards, they're helping build that command climate. So even if you're the leader, or if you're not the leader, you can help enforce those regulations. You can enforce that mentality within your unit. So building that command climate, making sure the Marines know, or whatever team you're a part of know, okay, this isn't going to happen. This is why it's not going to happen, because A, it's illegal, and B, it's wrong. It's going to crush the unit cohesion. It's going to crush the mentality of that unit, and you're not going to be as lethal and as powerful and as hardworking of a unit as you can be with those things going on. So that command climate and increasing the knowledge and understanding of those Marines is going to go a long way. All right, a big one now we're going to talk about is bystander prevention, or bystander interaction. We always talk about the 3 Ds. So direct, distract, and delegate are going to be the 3 Ds we talk about. So think about in your own minds, hey, what is a direct way of stopping a sexual assault, sexual harassment from happening? Well, go physically stop it, right? I'm not telling you to go, throw fists and punch somebody in the face to stop sexual harassment from happening or sexual assault from happening. But if that's what it needs to take, then you might be well within your limits to do that. More commonly, maybe just stepping up to somebody and say, hey man, she's looking a little drunk, or I don't think he's in the right state of mind for you to go have sex with her. Those are different ways that you can directly impact that sexual assault from not happening. Okay, so we want to take that direct route as much as possible, because that's going to be the most effective, in my opinion. Next, we distract. So maybe they're just not getting the hint. Maybe you try that direct way and they're just not getting it, or maybe you're just kind of cautious and don't want to be too upfront about it. Getting their mind off of that situation is going to go a long way. So let's say you see a buddy who's talking to another Marine, civilian, whatever it might be, and you notice that that person's really not in a great state of mind, or they don't really know where they're at. Go up to that Marine and maybe bring up something else that they might be thinking about, right? Or maybe there's a sports game on, so you can say like, hey, did you check out the Lakers last night? Or did you see that throw that Patrick Mahomes made? Whatever it might be, try to get their mind off that situation and maybe take them out of that, hey, I'm going to have sex mentality that they probably already have, right? So that'd be a good way to distract them, or just maybe kind of remove their mind from the situation. And then delegate. So maybe you don't feel comfortable stepping up. Maybe you don't know the person as well, or maybe not at all, and you see something bad from going on. So that might be a good chance for you to delegate that responsibility to somebody else. Maybe you notice that the person who potentially is about to commit that sexual assault, you saw them come in with a different group. So you go find that group and you say, hey, I think your buddy's kind of stepping over the line. You guys might want to check him out. Right, that would be a good way to delegate. If you're at a bar, if you're at a location that's pretty well populated, there might be bouncers, there might be security nearby. So don't be afraid to get them involved. Okay, if you're worried about the ramifications of your friendship or whatever it might be afterwards, then listen, that's on you. But I know for me, I would rather lose a friendship and stop a sexual assault than the other way around. So go ahead and grab that security member, grab that bouncer, grab that professional and say, hey, there's something going on. Maybe you want to check it out, and help them get involved with that before it happens. So those are some bystander intervention techniques. There's a bunch of different ways to use those techniques to kind of break them out into those three sort of categories. So try to stop it before it happens. That's the ultimate goal. All right, and then some common sense things. So I remember, when I was going through, Sapr training and UVA certification, I brought up this topic, and everybody kind of jumped down my throat because I brought it up. But there's a lot of ways that we can maybe reduce sexual assaults, maybe not prevent them necessarily, but there's definitely ways that we can reduce them, and common sense is going to carry that a lot. A lot of times we say like, oh, she or he was in a position, they put themselves in a position to be sexually assaulted because of where they were, the time of day, what they were wearing. So while all those do not at all justify a sexual assault from happening, if they weren't in those situations to begin with, then maybe we could have stopped it from happening, right? So if someone's going down a back alley at night by themselves, probably not the best thing to do, right? And that's not even sexually assault specific. That could just be a mugging or something bad from happening. But if we can be there for our Marines, if we can be there for our friends, for our peers, and not let them go down alleys at night alone, or maybe not let them go home with strangers as often as they might do, right? If we can take them away from those situations, then those are definitely ways that we can help prevent sexual assaults. Now, I'm not getting into that victim blaming part, so I'm not saying, hey, you deserved it because you were going down an alley. Absolutely not, right? That's not the case. However, if you keep your friends from going into places at times of day that they don't need to be, then maybe we can help prevent those assaults from happening. So that's just something to keep in mind. Use that common sense approach. Go out. We talk about those buddy pairs all the time, and those teammates when we go out drinking and partying, and even just going out to sporting events or concerts, whatever it might be. Make sure you stick close to those friends and take care of one another while you're out. All right, now we're going to get into the response section. So again, can't say it enough. If we can prevent sexual assaults and sexual harassment from happening before it starts, then that's great. That's our goal. But we're not going to be able to stop every one of them until that mentality has changed in society. Hopefully it happens sooner rather than later. But just so you have the tools in your toolbox to know how to handle these events, sexual assault, sexual harassments, after they've happened, that way we can take care of our Marines, all right? So first thing we want to talk about is that restricted versus unrestricted reporting. So you guys have probably heard this multiple times. The restricted versus unrestricted basically means at what level that report goes to and how it can be handled, right? So restricted reports mean that only certain people are going to find out about that information. And then in the unit, so we're talking Marine specific here, that unit, basically the commander of that unit is only going to find out that something happened. They're not going to know any of the details, all right? This is going to help animosity. It's going to help make sure that the Marines are staying individual if they wanted to. So that's going to be the restricted report, okay? Only specified people can take restricted reports, right? So uniformed victim advocates can take restricted reports. So if you're watching and you don't know who your unit UVA is or UVAs are, make sure you go find that out. That way you know, hey, if something happens to a friend of mine or a fellow Marine, then I know who I can go talk to. And chaplains can take restricted reports. Other Sapr trained professionals can take restricted reports. So those are the folks that you can talk to and keep that restricted report, right? Unrestricted report is going to go through the chain of command, right? So one common misconception is that if you file an unrestricted report, that the whole world is going to know. Now, certainly more people are going to find out just because of the nature, but if done properly, if handled the right way by the chain of command, only that chain of command is going to find out, right? And that chain of command is going to find out, the who, what, when, where, and why of the incident, and then they're going to get, all the necessary information to the people that need to take care of it, right? Whether it's law enforcement to higher chain of command, whatever it might be. So that's going to be your unrestricted report. Now, one big thing to remember with reporting is that you can always go from a restricted to an unrestricted report. So if you start off and you say, and this might not be for you, this might be for a friend, so it's good to know just to help anybody out, but let's just say you start off with a restricted report and it's not getting where it needs to be, or you're not getting the support that you think you need, and you say, hey, I want to make this an unrestricted report, especially maybe if you want law enforcement to get involved now, that might be a good reason to change from restricted to an unrestricted report. You always have that right. So you can always go from restricted to unrestricted. You cannot go from an unrestricted to restricted. So if you start out unrestricted, if you inform your chain of command and you say, hey, this is what's going on, immediately that chain of command is going to start forwarding that information and it becomes an unrestricted report. You cannot take that back and you cannot make it a restricted report. So just remember that moving forward. Again, it might not be for you, it might be for your peers. So you have that information available about the unrestricted versus restricted reporting. All right, next response technique is going to be just comfort for the victim. So we talk about this a lot with a lot of different topics, whether it be substance misuse or suicidal ideations. But Like everything else, being there for our Marines when things like this happen is going to go a long way, all right? There's probably going to be a lot of folks there that they don't want to talk to. There might be that level of, embarrassment. There might be that level of, low self-esteem because of the incident, and that's probably expected when these things happen. But if you're close enough to that friend, to that Marine, that they'll let you in and they'll talk to you about the information, and then just be there for the Marine. That's going to go a long way. Give them someone to talk to, give them someone to bounce ideas off of, and just remind them that, listen, I'm here for you. I'm here for whatever you need. If you want to start X or Y report, then we can go get that going. Whatever it is that you can do for that Marine, that's going to go a long way to comfort them. And then, so another form of the response, and this is going to be, really more just of the impact it's going to have. So that unit is probably going to, assuming it's an unrestricted report, that unit is more than likely going to make some changes. So you're going to lose Marines from the unit, either the victim or the alleged offender, whatever it may be. Those folks are probably no longer going to be in the unit. You're going to destroy that unit cohesion, right? Because especially in the Marine Corps here, we're trusting each other. We're a team, we're a family. And the second you violate that trust, you're no longer a cohesive unit. So that's going to crush the unit ability to perform. So those changes are going to really impact those Marines, but it's going to impact the unit too. And then other folks are going to, PCS and PCA out. So because, hey, I can't have this in my unit. I know that there's something going on between these two Marines. We don't know the exact extent, but I'm going to take a chance now to send this Marine to a different unit. Well, now you just lost one of your trained Marines and someone who's been a part of that unit and that family for a while. So that's going to make you less combat effective, and it's going to make you a less cohesive unit and family. So those are some of the responses that we're going to have. Again, I can't reiterate enough that the unrestricted versus restricted reporting thing is important to differentiate between. So remember, you can go from restricted to unrestricted at any time. You cannot go from unrestricted to restricted. One thing to note with reporting, so restricted and unrestricted reportings, some states are going to have different rules with restricted and unrestricted reports with regard to medical attention. Okay, I know that California is one. I don't know what other ones are out there, but in California, if you go to medical care, so you go to a hospital, clinic, whatever it is, and you ask for a sexual assault kit, commonly known as a rape kit, to get tested, if you ask for that, then it is automatically going to be pushed to law enforcement, and that makes it an unrestricted report. So other states are going to have different rules for that, so make sure you know, especially if you're a commander or a leader in your unit, know what your state's rules are. But that's one thing to remember, is that different states, different areas might have different rules with regard to getting tested, getting medical care, and things like that. So keep that in mind. Bottom line with Sapr is, hey, we want to stop these before they even happen. We want to change that command climate. If it's out there at all anymore, hopefully not, but we want to change that command climate to say these things are not going to happen. We're not going to let that into our unit. We're not going to let that break our unit apart, and we're going to maintain high cohesion and high levels of efficiency and effectiveness by eliminating this before it even happens, all right? But, until that mentality changes throughout all of society, these things are still gonna happen, unfortunately, and hopefully you got some tips to respond to those properly. So if you have any questions, send them my way. Otherwise, have a great day, Marines.